From KGW, it's 2020 Rewind, the year in sports.
And the 106th Rose Bowl will go into the record books for all time for fans everywhere to look back and see that Oregon beat Wisconsin again in the Rose Bowl. 2-1 final score. Oregon 28, Wisconsin 27. Oregon, the 2020 Rose Bowl champions.
We just won the Rose Bowl.
Jerry Allen with the call. Doesn't this feel like forever ago? The Oregon Ducks beating Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl back on January 1st, kicking off what promised to be a fun and exciting 2020. Yeah, about that. What is good, everyone? My name is Orlando Sanchez. Art Edwards, keeping it socially distant.
Yes.
You ready to put a bow on 2020?
Absolutely, no doubt.
Well, socially and distant, those two words might best describe 2020, Art. A year none of us could have predicted. Sports are often talked about as an escape from the real world, but in 2020, that was impossible to do. That started all the way back on January 26th and the death of an NBA legend. Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 others were killed in a helicopter crash while traveling to a basketball game in California. Their deaths shook the sports world, especially the NBA. Every team paying tribute to the number 8 and 24. Bryant was a hero to a lot of current players, even a friend and teammate to some. And that includes Carmelo Anthony of the Trail Blazers. We heard from the team just hours after Bryant's passing.
Just the fact that, he was gone. It just seemed unbelievable. Like, it couldn't possibly be true.
Probably the hardest game I ever had to play. I don't know. Honestly, knowing him the way that I know him, he would have wanted me to play. Our friendship and relationship was deep in basketball. It was family. It was friendship. It was basketball was the last piece of connective tissue between us two.
I'm just thankful that I was able to express the impact he had on my life. Basketball, my work ethic, my approach, my brother's approach, our whole family. We were all Kobe fans, and I always tell people he was the guy that I was afraid to meet, him and Michael Jordan.
And following the Bryant's deaths, the LA Lakers didn't take the court for nearly a week. Their first game, hosting the Blazers. I was at the Staples Center for an emotional night.
Amazing grace.
This was Kobe's night. Purple and gold. The number 8 and 24 filled the Staples Center. The first game since his tragic passing. 2 courtside seats reserved for Kobe and his daughter Gigi. Star power beyond basketball. A tribute fit for a king. A chance for those that loved Kobe to express it in their own way.
It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing feeling, to see the community come together.
And everybody's connected.
Cellist Ben Hong supplied the soundtrack to a video tribute that exemplified Mamba mentality and the value of family, highlighted by his wife and kids.
What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming.
LeBron James and his Lakers teammates brought to tears as Boyz II Men sang the national anthem. James took the mic, going off script to speak from the heart about his friend.
So in the words of Kobe Bryant, Mamba out, but in the words of us, not forgotten. Live on, brother.
An intense, emotionally charged game before a shot ever went up. A historic game before a point was ever scored.
Boy, that was just an amazing way. When I watched that game, it just it gave me chills. When I was taking in everything. Orlando, you were there. What was it like to be in Los Angeles for that.
Yeah, Art, I still look at that video and get goosebumps. I thought I knew how big of a deal Kobe Bryant was until I went to LA for this. His name in tributes everywhere, from buildings to buses, and the thousands upon thousands of people that showed up to share their Kobe Bryant memory. It really was a unique and special time in the sports world, and one that I will never forget. And seeing that firsthand, that was such an emotionally charged night. One, because of all the people that came out to show their respects for Kobe, but also when I got inside the arena, Art, and seeing the girls from the Mamba Academy walk inside the Staples Center, it just broke my heart, man, to see something like that. So that is something that I will always cherish, is being there for a moment like that, where I was there to cover a basketball game, but the basketball game didn't matter. So, Art, Kobe Bryant was a big advocate of women's basketball. He took this picture with the Oregon Ducks earlier that season, his daughter right there in the middle. He built relationships with the players like Sabrina Ionescu. So, Art, you were at the Ducks-Beavers game the day that Kobe died. What do you remember about being there?
Well, I just remember how shocked everyone was as we began to hear the news. One of the sports information guys from Oregon State, Steve Fink, is the one who told me, and I couldn't believe it. And then we started looking around to see, especially the Oregon team, because we knew that they had a relationship with Kobe and Sabrina Ionescu having the relationship with him. John Canzano and I were courtside, and we saw Sabrina's dad, and we went up and asked, is she going to play? Because at that point we didn't really know. And he just kind of nodded, yeah, and she's going to be okay. When the team came out, she had written things on her shoes, and even the crowd obviously knew what was going on and what had happened and what was going through the minds of the players. And to see them out there, and you could see the emotion in their faces. Not only was it at the rivalry game, but there was something much bigger that had happened. And Sabrina came out and played another one of her great games, and Oregon was able to get that victory. Just a really emotional day, and it just sort of changed the scope and the focus of things after what had happened earlier that day.
Seeing them embrace each other and the amount of love within that team was really special, because you could see Sabrina's eyes just swollen from crying her heart out all day. Were you surprised that she played, Art?
No, not surprised that she played. She has been a warrior on the court the entire time that she had been at Oregon. So, no, I wasn't really surprised that she played. You kind of felt that she would go out there and give it her best. Great moment at the end of the game when the Oregon State players, all came over and everybody sort of shared a moment on the court. So it was really quite the day.
It was bigger than basketball, man.
Oh, yeah.
And on the court, it was a banner year for women's basketball in the entire state of Oregon. The Ducks, they finished the year ranked second in the AP poll. Oregon State finished 14th. The University of Portland upset 11th-ranked Gonzaga en route to win the WCC tournament and make the NCAA tournament for the first time since 1997. Portland State got to the second round of the Big Sky tournament. Art, what will you remember about this banner year for women's sports?
Well, the disappointment that we didn't get to see Oregon really get to get the chance to play for that national championship. I mean, I really do believe, even though they were number 2 in the season-ending poll, I really do believe that they were going to win the tournament. I mean, they were that good. And then to see Oregon State have another great year, I mean, they're just, piling up those great years. University of Portland, boy, they're going to be doing some great things down the road with Michael Meek as the head coach. He had great success at George Fox, winning a national championship there, and he's brought that to the University of Portland with him. And, Portland State really has it going, too. I mean, the year before they made the tournament, last year the second round of the Big Sky tournament. So women's hoops is big time in the state of Oregon.
I love seeing the Pilots celebrate right there, because they were picked to finish last at the beginning of the year and had punched their ticket. So it was such a special time. But as you said, man, all signs pointed to that Oregon Ducks team playing for a national championship. And that unfinished business, one of the big reasons why Sabrina Ionescu came back in the first place. That team was charged and ready to make a run, and they wouldn't have had to leave the state until the Final Four.
Would have been great.
Art, unfortunately, the Ducks, the Beavers, Pilots, they didn't get a chance to play in the big dance, and no one did. When we come back, the sports world shuts down. We look back at a crazy time around the world. And the shutdown included the Olympics. We talked to a 3-time Olympian from right here in the Pacific Northwest.
So both head coaches have gone back, and you see the teams heading back to the locker room. The officials now going over to the scores table.
Confusion in Oklahoma City. Sports coming to a screeching halt. Utah's Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert testing positive for COVID-19. The NBA suspending the season almost immediately. Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, NWSL, NHL, they weren't far behind. Even the Hillsboro Hops season was canceled. Up in Edmonton, the Winnipeg Jets and Edmonton Oilers were all aware of the situation in Oklahoma, asking each other if they were playing in their last game of the season. In Las Vegas, Washington State beat Colorado in the last first-round game of the Pac-12 tournament. It would be the final Division I college basketball game of the year. The NCAA canceling the men's and women's tournaments the next morning. We didn't get a second-round matchup between the Ducks and Beavers. Instead, the Ducks were named Pac-12 champs. Art, this feels like one of those where were you moments in history, man.
It was just crazy. You know what? I was sitting around and kind of watching as everything transpired. I was supposed to be on vacation. I was going to go to Indian Wells for the big tennis tournament, and they canceled that as well. That was about the first sporting event to go, and then all the dominoes started to fall. And I started thinking, oh man, are we going to see any more sports at all this year? It was crazy.
Art, I was standing in this studio when the NBA shut it down, and that was the first thing that went through my mind was, uh-oh, this is real. This is happening. And what a week that was, Art. Rip City getting ready for Jusuf Nurkic's big return. I mean, that was a marquee game. And then the high school state basketball tournaments, they ended without crowning a champion. What do you remember about that week?
Well, that week especially, you know, the high school championships, I had been down in Corvallis covering the 5A games and just some tremendous basketball down there and was getting ready to go back. I had actually packed everything up in the car and I was getting ready to head back to Corvallis to see the Final Four games of the 5A tournament. And then all of a sudden someone said, no, they're not going to play. And I ran over to the University of Portland where the head of the OSAA was and was able to do a quick interview with him. And at that point, you know, they weren't sure if maybe they would be able to get it in a few more days or if it was just a done deal. It was just unbelievable that we were looking at not being able to finish out those championships.
I can remember, Art, I was at the Child Center covering the other brackets here in Portland, and I remember looking around thinking to myself, this is the last time I'm going to see live sports for a long time.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be an Olympic year too, Art, but it wasn't long before the Summer Games joined the rest of the sports world. On March 24th, the IOC postponed the Games to the summer of 2021. It's the first time the Olympics have been postponed since 1944. Many Olympic athletes are in flux right now, including Vancouver, Washington native Kara Winger, a record-setting javelin thrower who was preparing for Tokyo to be her final run at gold. We caught up with her in quarantine.
This is it for Kara Winger, a 3-time Olympian and American record holder. She's set on qualifying to throw the javelin at the Olympics one more time.
I plan on it being my last Olympics, so, you know, no holds barred. A medal would be amazing. Performing on the day is something that I finally feel like I'm learning in these last couple seasons, and that gets me really excited for whenever Tokyo 2021 happens.
With sports on hold, Winger remains positive, embracing the quarantine life.
I feel uniquely suited to quarantine. My personality is such that I'm happy to be at home.
Along with her husband Russ and dog Maddie, working from home in Colorado Springs isn't a problem.
Good job.
I was able to borrow equipment from the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center here in town, and I haven't really missed a beat. I'm lucky that my sport takes place outside and I can go find a field and throw javelins when I need to. So I really sympathize more with the indoor athletes that need specific equipment and can't get it, because I'm doing fine. I'm thriving in quarantine.
At 34, she's ready to go. And being from the Pacific Northwest has its advantages when it comes to training.
So we're staying on grass right now to like make the impact a little bit less. Growing up in Washington, there are multiple meets like on grass runways, so kind of feels like home, like a really nice full circle story. And I actually started my 2020 training on Skyview's track, like doing 200-meter repeats in December. So I've been having like a really fun, nostalgic year.
She was introduced to the sports and fell in love with it at Skyview High School. Vancouver, Washington is where she calls home. And if the track and field season is canceled, expect a lot more trips to the PNW.
I miss it. Like there's nothing like a Pacific Northwest summer. And if I get the chance to kind of reset in that place that is my home, that would be really, really fun. So it's always on my mind, always in my heart. And I love Vancouver.
Love to see it, that's for sure. Art, you interviewed a lot of athletes this year, specifically Olympic hopefuls.
Yes.
What has that experience been like for you?
Well, first of all, disappointment that they weren't going to be able to possibly get to the games this time. Some of them, though, felt pretty positive about it because it was going to give them a little bit more chance to do some more training. A couple of the people that I talked to are pretty young, so they were going to be long shots to make the Olympic team this year. But what they were hoping was that extra year might give them what they need to be able to make the team next summer. For the coming summer.
One common denominator, it seems like, is that they all are on the same page when it comes to a schedule versus the uncertainty that 2020 was. So at least now, hopefully, they can get back on track.
Yes.
Art, the sports world standstill lasted until late June. When we come back, we're living that bubble life as teams take the field with nobody in the stands.
You don't really realize that there's no fans after a while because you just have to. You have to make your own atmosphere, and so you have to pretend that, create your own energy, and so that's what we were trying to do.
What a time to be alive, right? June 27th, after 3.5 months with practically no sports, games were back, but with no fans in the stands. We were living that bubble life. The Thorns kicked off the NWSL Challenge Cup in Utah. The NBA, WNBA, MLS all set up shop in Florida, while the NHL held the Stanley Cup playoffs in Edmonton and Toronto. Bubble Life gave us images like this. That is Beaverton's own reporter Ben Golliver getting his steps in while stuck in his Florida hotel room, quarantining before getting into the NBA bubble. Oh, that is dedication, man.
Got to get your work in.
It was a situation that many athletes had never experienced, being cut off from the world, sometimes their families, so they could keep playing. Our local teams, they played pretty well in their bubbles, Art.
Well, there's no doubt about that. I think the Portland teams, we're talking about the Blazers, the Timbers, the Thorns, they just owned the bubble. I mean, they were fantastic. The Blazers, obviously had to win a whole bunch of games just to make it into the playoffs, to elevate themselves into that spot, and they did that. They were just, they were incredible. I felt like they maybe ran out of gas a little bit at the end. And when we talk about the MLS, of course, we've got the Timbers, and they go and they win the MLS is Back Cup, just sort of, firing their way through that and really looking like a real solid, strong team. And coming out of that, maybe even some thought maybe the team to beat the rest of the way in the MLS. And then, of course, the Thorns as well, getting the job done. In the two events that they had, they were even able to win a $25,000 grant for a local business because of their play when they were in that bubble kind of situation. So, as far as the Portland teams went, things went pretty well.
Yeah, I would say it was good for our jobs as well to yes. cover these teams do so well. And I'll never forget seeing the Thorns play that first game. It just felt so good to have live sports back again. It just was that next step to something normal happening again.
We needed it.
All these games were played during a turbulent summer across the country. Social justice at the forefront of protests nationwide, with many high-profile athletes taking part. Art, as a newsman, someone who's covered a lot of protests and marches, how was this one different?
Well, when you saw the athletes out there, I think it sort of made everything, it maybe brought a little bit more focus. You know, some of the events that I've covered here in Portland, it seems like they don't have a lot of focus. It's just a bunch of people out there, and you're not exactly sure what it is they're maybe trying to accomplish. When we get the athletes out there, because they are trying to use their voice to affect social change, it became a little bit different. You know what? When we saw Damian Lillard at the protests here in Portland, it became a time when it was like, okay, you know, these guys are a big deal to a lot of people, and they're people that, you know, folks will listen to. Now, the hope is that as we move forward, they will come up with really, you know, kind of actionable things that it really will be able to make a difference, and their influence and some of the things that they were talking about will really go forward and move forward. But it was good to see that there was someone that you could kind of focus on and rally around and look at as a person who was kind of leading things in the right direction.
Art, those images of Dame marching the streets of Portland were so iconic, and I think were just very special and represented this entire state, seeing the thousands upon thousands of people march through our city, and Damian Lillard is at the forefront. How incredible was that to witness something like that?
Yeah, you know, it really was incredible to see something like that for, you know, a high-profile guy like Damian Lillard, somebody that is respected and looked up to in the community, to come out there and become a part of that really says a lot about him. I mean, we know what kind of a leader he is. We know what kind of a person he is from what we can see with the basketball. But it really showed to me that he believes in this community, and he feels strongly about this community and the people who live here.
All right, Art, no easy way to segue, but some would argue that the sports calendar revolves around the football season. The NFL returned in September after skipping the preseason with few, if any, fans in the stands. Same goes for college football. So let's take you back to November 7th as the Pac-12 was the last Power 5 conference to open its season. The Ducks and Beavers were at home. No Pac-12 teams had fans in the stands. OSU was the only team to play a full schedule in the conference, winning a couple of games, including a win over Oregon. The Ducks, they went on to play 6 conference games, win the Pac-12 for the second year in a row. Art, your takeaways from this football season with the Ducks and Beavs?
Well, I'm thankful that we eventually did have football in the Pac-12, even though it was, you know, it was really hard to get a lot of the games in. And, you know, good for the Ducks that they were able to come through and win the Pac-12 again and get to a big bowl game.
There are so many moments about this year, Art, but going into an empty stadium to watch football was one that just blew my mind. And seeing those cardboard cutouts is a picture that I will never forget. I promise you that's one of the first things that comes to mind when I think back to going to live sporting events.
Yeah, I just love those cutouts. You know what? You get the South Park cutouts. I mean, people had fun with them, which, you know, was something you really needed to do.
I'm looking forward to the Ducks and Beavers mailing mine to me at my house, man.
There you go.
I just thought it was such a cool thing about 2020 and making the most of it. And also, Art, congrats to all the champions. And you know what? Let's say goodbye to 2020 and hello to 2021. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, everyone.